So I guess we are rolling with this podcast that is actually done in the car without any video. And we've got Mr. Stephen Sullivan, PhD. Hello, Stephen.
Hello, Otto. It's good to see you after several years. It's good to see you in person.
Yeah, it's been a couple of years now. I think the last time it was like 4 years ago.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's nice to meet in person after those years. And like, thanks to the technologies, we managed to keep a good touch through online training.
Yeah, nice. I mean, this is the kind of funny thing that like we haven't seen each other face to face for 4 or 5 years, and yet like I've been like seeing you several times a week for the last year and a half, 2 years maybe. So interesting.
Yeah. So you were mentioning there's some. You were talking about how is the life in Dublin now, and how the mental health, and how some people were already on the edge of anxiety before, and now since everything going on in the world is just adding to that. So, and also we mentioned something about hygiene. So, you wanna talk something about that, Stephen?
Well, I suppose like what we were talking about was, I kind of work in Edinburgh in Scotland, and I'm always interested to see how Ireland is doing relative to the UK. Because I think you can start to see the effects of Brexit now, but also you can see the effects of COVID, and there was the government didn't handle the COVID situation as well in the UK as maybe we did here. There was kind of a more community solidarity and people kept to the rules. And but I think one of the commonalities, like the healthcare services, like the infrastructures are still reeling from that disruption. Like they're heavily bureaucratic structures, and they're not very adaptable to huge change like we saw with the COVID. So I think one of the things that's still happening is that the healthcare systems in both the UK and in Ireland are still trying to cope with the backlog of, people that didn't get treatment during COVID because it was too dangerous to admit them to hospital. And you've got problems with, I suppose people are very tired, and very overworked for a long period of time, and you have budgeting issues within the healthcare system as well. So, I was interested to see how well Ireland was doing, and I just came back on Friday, but I was meeting people, and obviously things like the inflationary pressures now, and that's an even bigger thing in the UK as well. So it's stressful times, which I suppose as we talk about, makes mental health even more important than it would be normally, because being able to take the financial pressure or other types of pressures, your resilience is tied into how well you take care of your mental health, and I mean, then we were talking about, I suppose an aspect of overall health is hygiene, and keeping your apartment. And there's the article that came out recently about average single male doesn't change their bed sheets on average every 4 months. And just the importance of having a clean domicile, is in order to kind of keep your health up, and but obviously not over cleaning, which is the other.
And the OCD.
Side. Yeah, OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, or if you have young children and you kind of constantly disinfecting everything, your kids' immune systems don't learn, and then they have problems like eczema or asthma, or other kind of conditions then later on. So
Yeah, and people can change, obviously, can take some hints from their friends. As I told you about the phone, like it says a lot about you, but it's like small things.
So I had a plastic covering on my phone, and it was kind of ripped in the side, and Otto said, "Take that off straight away."
I didn't say take it off. I said this says a lot about you.
Yeah, telling me I'm messy. No, I'm just not.
So Stephen, after the lockdown, it's a little messy. He let his screen on his phone a little bit.
You're so you're a millennial. You identify with your phone. A phone is just a tool for me. I'm old. I remember the days where people talk to each other face to face, man.
Yeah, I do remember that as well. When if you wanted to meet a friend, you basically set up a meeting and it's like, okay, let's meet next week on Thursday at 3 p.m. over here. And if you couldn't make it, you have to call the family landline and then say, hey, can I speak to, I don't know, Peter, and tell him like I can't make it or whatever, leave him message.
Yeah. That would be a thing, and you'd have to phone the family line, and your parents would answer the phone, and can we speak to so and so? Jesus, yeah.
Yeah, so we have moved actually quite a lot technologically.
Yeah.
So we like the whole different areas of business and jobs are evolved, and it gives people a lot of freedom. Like, for example, people who love travel and are able to work from their laptop on the go with a mobile SIM or hotspot. So if they love traveling and living in different places and still being able to make their living while they do that, that's amazing.
I think but one of the things about modern living and the internet and everything is that our brains are used to being super stimulated now, whereas in 2 or 3 generations ago there'll be a lot of kind of like relative downtime, and what the effects of that on people are long term will be quite interesting. We're more aware of our biology and how to general health. But then I think the consequences of the modern age on health are, they're only just being elucidated. Like, I mean, one of the things I've been thinking a lot about recently is that, when you live in America, most of the cities are completely geared towards driving everywhere. You can't walk anywhere.
Especially in USA.
Yeah, exactly. Like, so outside the older cities in the United States, like Philadelphia or Boston or New York. But like if you go to, someplace like Austin, Texas or LA, you literally cannot really walk around at all.
It's like crossing 10 motorways.
Yeah, and it's that kind of like basal level of exercise that people don't think about in Europe. But you're walking around the place, you walk into town, walk to go shopping, and having that all based in the car, it's terrible because it's just kind of like you're taking so much of your natural exercise that's orientated towards getting yourself sorted from day to day is removed from the system. So it's and then you have to supplement that kind of natural directive kind of activity with kind of an artificial training,
Working
like
out in
gym.
a gym.
Yeah. So like, I mean, there's a lot of exercise that in a natural life is just there. You have to do it. Like, for example, walking to a well and filling up the well with water and, bringing it back to the house and, stuff like that, or going out and getting shopping or, things of that nature. And we're kind of phasing that out. So it can be too comfortable and then your body doesn't do what it's been evolved to do, So.
Yeah, I'd say in Europe we kind of heading towards that more cyclist and pedestrian city centers and areas. Here in Dublin, the whole Dunleary area was changed as well, and a couple of other streets. And I think Holland is really good with making people sort of preferring cycling.
Yeah, I mean they're the flattest country, and I always laugh at this because like they say, oh, the Dutch, they're very good. They do a lot of cycling. Yeah, they've got no hills. It's easy to cycle in Netherlands, but one thing they do is they design their roads, and their cycle lanes really, really, really well. So the Dutch are good engineers. Like you remember. Obviously their dams and stuff are second to none because they needed their dams to be really, really good, and
For their own survival.
Yeah, exactly. And that engineering then has kind of spilled into other areas like urban planning and street design. It's actually quite fascinating. A lot of these engineers and architects think an awful lot about street infrastructure and how it makes people act in different ways, and how do you elicit particular types of behavior at this particular junction, and it's a fascinating, and like, if you have badly designed things, then there'll be a lot of cyclists getting trampled on by cars and stuff. But in the Netherlands, they do it really, really well, because the cyclist and the pedestrian have, that they've got the first consideration, and cars are then adapted into the infrastructure afterwards.
Yeah, I think here in Dublin, you can see how sometimes we go from red light to red light when you go on an 11, for example.
Yeah,
It's like, where's the brain? Like, I mean, like you should make some algorithm to
yeah,
make sure that everybody flows the best.
yeah. But like, it's kind of interesting. Again, it's been a while since I saw Dublin city centre, and more like, even more of it now is pedestrianized. COVID is really pushing that, as being the new norm, and I think it's actually really, really good. Like, I mean, some of the local businesses are fighting it, but the inner city around Trinity College, the more that gets pedestrianized, the cooler it gets, I think. So.
Yeah, and maybe on different topic, is there any new research from gene therapy that you sort of like you focus your
Well, these things happen. There's always new technologies, and there's always scientists getting interested in, these kind of new technologies. But, sometimes it proves that, the new types of technologies aren't practical at the moment, or they need to be tweaked, or you need to risk assess them thoroughly or understand their consequences. So, these things kind of, they come slowly into the clinic. But what is interesting is, like, for example, I visited St. James's Hospital there in Dublin yesterday to see a cell processing facility. It's set up by a company called ACT Vector, and they're building this new cell processing suite that will allow you to take cells from cancer patients and make them more effective at fighting the cancer, and then reintroducing them back into the patient. So, that kind of infrastructure will, start to have a clinical benefit in, maybe 5 to 10 years, as part of clinical trials, but then subsequently, be rolling out more and more advanced therapies that, hopefully will do a lot for people's quality of life. Because, like, if you look at the way cancer is, treated at the moment with chemotherapy and radiation, it's very invasive, very tough. Obviously you'll only go down those kind of routes if there's no other option. But it'd be great if we can develop these kind of other options, like, cell therapies, immunotherapies, that are, basically helping the body to fight the cancer more effectively itself.
So I heard recently from you and also from another client. She is in sort of pharma industry herself.
Yeah.
She's actually in the field of approving the new drugs.
Yeah.
And so you both said that there's a new research, something really good about, instead of like trying to kill the cancer and kind of like do very toxic treatments on the person, to basically do immune system boosting and teaching your immune system how to deal with that.
Yeah, or even, what you can do is you can take a biopsy of the tumor, and then you can characterize that material, and you can start to predict what were the markers that the immune system will identify first. So you're kind of taking a bit of the cancer out, understanding how the body will identify it as cancerous tissue, and then selecting cells that are best able to see those particular markers. So you're basically taking the patient's own immune system and assisting it to fight the cancer more effectively. It's kind of like, obviously, that's when you have the disease, and it's obviously what we talk a lot about in this podcast is kind of the healthy lifestyle that'll prevent the cancer and the pathology arising in the first place. So, I mean, prevention is better than cure. But if you are unfortunate enough to get cancer, then we can try and develop these new ways of helping the body, assist in evacuating the cancer itself. That should be less damaging and less stressful to the patient.
I like how you say evacuating rather than killing or destroying.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's actually an interesting case, like if you just kill off a load of cells all in one go, it can cause a cascade reaction. So if you kill off all the cancer cells in a really tight timeline, then it can actually cause a chain reaction where other tissues start to be killed as well. So the temporal nature in which you slowly kill the cancer is quite important, because you don't want a ton of cell death all at once, because the neighboring cells, will also get affected. So, it's, you want to do it in a controlled way that gets rid of your cancer, but doesn't affect the other cells around the cancerous area losing their functionality, or, making them unhappy or sick themselves, So, it's interesting. You talked about regulators, like regulatory affairs, and the regulatory affairs people have a huge amount of knowledge, and scientists who are trying to develop new therapies tend to look at these guys as, they're stopping me, being, progressing my science, but actually they're really, really important gatekeepers, because the scientists developing the therapeutic, they're thinking about developing the therapy, and they'll be thinking about the cells and the science around all that. Whereas the regulator is seeing things from a risk point of view, what could probably be a danger if introduced into the patient. So, they're real specialists in terms of, how processes can go wrong, how technologies can have unforeseen consequences, how, and sometimes it's about human nature. Like, people might want to do things in a particular way because it appeals to their ego, or, and that mightn't be necessarily beneficial for the patient. So they're important, kind of a counterbalance to, the innovation and the drive to, develop new therapies. They're making sure that the therapies that are developed are fit for actually administration into patients, because you don't want to administer something damaging that then, severely damages or kills the patient, and then that basically, that causes a blacklist of the whole sector then as well. Apart from, obviously damaging or killing the patient, you don't want that to, you don't want to go into this kind of new therapeutic to go into a clinical context too soon, because, you mightn't have fully worked out all the consequences of and all the risks associated with your new therapy. So, these things take years, and, I think the important thing is that you need a lot of different sources of expertise working together in tandem to actually get a new therapeutic out of the lab and into the clinic.
Very interesting. I always like listening about science and all this kind of research. And we mentioned last time, we say that, like people over 70, a male with prostate cancer and also ovarian cancer. So you told me something that it's actually much higher risk of actually having cancer in cells that last longer. So maybe you can explain that.
Well, there's there's the cells in your body, like sperm and eggs, and they're called meats. They're kind of sex cells. They're involved in reproduction, and the cells that form those sex cells can reside in the body for long periods of time, relative to other cell types. So, for example, the cells of your gut, that's in your gut right now, there'll be a new set of cells lining your gut next week, or even within a few days. Similarly, your skin cells, there's very high turnover in the dermis and the epidermis of your skin. So there's a lot of sloughing off, and it's not. We tend to think of the tissues in our bodies as static, but actually some of them can be really, really dynamic. So the skin cells that are covering your hands or face right now, they won't be the same cells in a week or two. You know what I mean? And that's good that it's forming a dynamic protective barrier between you and the outside world. And eventually most of the cells in the body get completely turned over. But when it comes to cancer, you can get slow growing cancers, like prostate cancer is usually, like, a lot of men get that, but it's not clinically significant because the cancer grows so slowly. The patient can be dying of something else in the meantime before the prostate cancer can be pathologically or clinically a problem. So but then you have other types of cancer that grow very, very quickly and aggressively.
So we continue with our podcast with different topic and more on Stoic philosophy, Stephen. Some maybe even just to recap what we were already talking about in the last couple of podcasts.
Well, I suppose the key thing is when we're dealing with super stressful situations, some people have a religious background, and other people have kind of like a value set to try and help them deal with very stressful situation. And I think one of the things you and I really like is Stoic philosophy, which is kind of a very kind of practical way to maintaining resilience under pressure. And it's about kind of allocating resources and energy to where they will have the best effect. So I think one of the things that you and I talk about a lot is people worrying themselves over things that the worry doesn't actually help them at all. Like, so it's one thing to think about something that you can do to improve your life or improve your health, but then there can be the downside of that, where people are ruminating about things either in the past or in the future, reading clickbait stuff, and just kind of, getting very worried about things that are in the future, or regretting in the past. And, that doesn't really do you any good. And I mean, for example, classic in case is the Russian-Ukraine conflict. Like, we're in Ireland, and, if you're watching all that stuff every day, it's it's terribly sad. But if you're not going to do something practically about the situation, just taking in all that kind of day to day, it's not healthy for you. I think, and we've an obligation to our own health, as well as the welfare of our fellow man. So to balance those two things, I think.
Yeah, well, we definitely talk a similar topic last time, and yeah, like with time we just realize, okay, well, we keep the track of what's going on, but then again, like, you have to look after yourself. And I find sometimes, when you are stressed out, just to go for exercise or go for a fast walk, or just like put the music on and just change environment a little bit.
Yeah, no, very much so, and just let those, and endorphins flow, because it's the ultimate torture. Put someone in a box where they can't move and then really stress them out. Like, that's not natural at all. It's natural to kind of when a stress happens, that you move, or like, that's what your body is evolved to do.
Also, it's very hard to think about problems while you're lifting your heavier weights there. You kind of have more acute problem, which is like, can I actually do the extra rep?
Well, yeah, and the thing is, if your conscious mind is dealing with something like, I have to, do another set of squats. That's when your unconscious mind is left alone to deal with some of your problems. I don't know, like, if you exercise and then come back to a problem, sometimes your subconscious mind would have dealt with it far more effectively than your conscious mind, So like, it's like the common idea of, like, when you sleep on a problem and suddenly you wake up and find a new way of dealing with it more effectively. So like, when you tune out your conscious mind, that's really when your unconscious mind deals with that issue more effectively.
It's also why we like distractions as well. But I think also the habit of, let's say, if someone have everyone around them, let's say somebody who is a kid and is growing up in a household where there's a tendency to worry and being angry and being kind of like in negative emotions, it's a pattern of behavior that is kind of not inherited but learned. And obviously, like when we get too much into worrying about everything, we kind of just making these synaptic connections, that plasticity of the brain, to kind of default to the same pattern of movement. So sometimes even just to be more conscious about that we have a problem about that, and default goes into worrying about stuff rather than that sort of aspect of Stoic philosophy where we know, okay, thinking about this problem doesn't solve it, and and when you start harming yourself by dragging yourself down all the time, then you have to find some kind of escape route, either unsubscribe from these negative channels. Let's say on YouTube, when I start to see all these kind of media that I don't like what they do, and it's causing like fear mongering, for example. So I just click there. Don't show up this channel on YouTube for me. So, and that's it. That's the first step for me, to be aware of that. Like, okay, this is toxic. I don't want that.
Yeah, and another thing that's been denied to us because we've been, in lockdown with COVID, is now we can go back and be social with people again. So being kind with other people gives us happiness too. So like, I mean, going out and being gentle with people and asking them how they got through this time, and actively listening to them, and giving them compliments about where they did well, that can have a huge impact on somebody's well-being, and that, if you're surrounded by healthy friends who you care about, you'll be healthy yourself too. Like, we're all kind of part of we're also part of groups of people, and if people around us are all sick or negatively thinking all the time, then that'll drag us down. So we, by taking care of our friends, we're actually taking care of ourselves,
Yeah, true. We are like the ecosystem of cells, and then bacteria and all sorts of viruses, and then as kind of on a higher level, we are like community of people on the street, in a town, and then let's say even through online, like communities of interest. Let's say like my gaming community, we are not locals, but we connected because of common interest. And there's a lot of these circles of people who are sort of put together into groups where they communicate and sharing certain ideas. So it only makes sense that sort of harmony on the cellular level, and sort of like our inner environment, and then us externally in the sort of like in the community, and then like how it goes from inside to outside. So I'd say a lot of countries, I guess, they kind of reflect what kind of mentality there is, because you can sometimes feel when you go to a different country, you kind of like, oh, everybody here is so negative, kind of like grumpy, and kind of like we have always jokes about like, oh, these guys from there, they're so negative, they always complain.
I mean, I think the other thing that, coming back to Ireland for like after a prolonged period, I'm meeting people and they're saying, oh yeah, I'm so far behind, I should have got this done by that date. And, sometimes people put themselves under completely unrealistic and inhumane kind of pressures. Like, I wanted to have this, I wanted to have that house sorted out, and I wanted to start a family by this age and all this kind of stuff. there's been a huge disruption. Like we've had the financial crisis, and we've had, COVID, and all these other things, and your life isn't, you shouldn't expect it to fall out as planned. I think I like that adage. Basically, God laughs when you tell him your plans, for your life. And, because life is pretty random, and the idea that you can plan it all out and that it can hit a schedule is, it's extremely unlikely, So, we take life as it comes. We can prepare our best for certain situations that we know might arise, but, we also have to be able to deal with the unpredictable part of it. And if we've got good, healthy lifestyle and we're strong, then we'll be able to improvise and adapt in those kind of particular situations, where we things aren't happening as expected. So
Yeah, I think that's a big stress many people put on themselves because they comparing themselves with the Joneses, and we should be already here because my friend already is doing this, have a house, or for example, have a kid, for example, already, and the stress is there. Like personally, I like to be more in the moment and not to worry too much about the future because I know I have zero control about many things that are arising in the future. So for me, it's just mentally much better to not worry about, but looking into my week, maybe a month, but these kind of milestone for life. I mean, you cannot force the change. I mean, you can try, but there are certain things that, sometimes you have to be more realistic about.
Yeah, I mean, like you shouldn't spend all your time in the future or the past. You have to spend, as much time as you can in the present.
That's where the anxiety comes in when you are constantly out of the present moment.
Yeah. So, people might be regretting something that happened in the past. It's in the past. It's changed. You can't do anything about it now. So, there's no point in ruminating about it. Or, there might be some potential threat in the future, and the future's not there yet. So you're not going to be able to do anything about it. So why worry about it? So, just enjoying the day. A lot to be said for one of the other things in life is that I subscribe to is simplicity. Like having a reasonable amount of things in your life that you care about and focus on, but not too much so that you're regularly overwhelmed. Because your performance, if you're regularly overwhelmed, your performance will go down in all areas of your life over time, and then you'll just be doing a suboptimal job at a lot of things. Whereas it can be better to just have a smaller few centers of focus that then you can do quite well in and feel good about what you've done.
Yeah, and we were talking about a lot is doing what you love to do. Because and also sometimes we feel like that job, for example, is the only job out there, and we sometimes don't realize how many different people and different experiences and different opportunities are out there. Sometimes we might be really small thinking, like this is all we've got, and actually losing that, we feel sometimes very fearful. But then again, risking a little bit and just closing one door will eventually open another door, which we don't even consider. And that's why I always tell people, keep working on yourself. Like if you want to live a long, happy life, you have to also be healthy because there's no happiness in being sick, and, the way we feel also, there's a biochemistry, the way we, feel it's quite a lot, I'd say, influenced by hormones and the balance. For example, if you have too much cortisol levels in your body, obviously that stress is on a kind of chemical level. But again, that's gonna influence how you breathe. It's gonna influence how your body is tensing up and overall experience of the everyday life.
Yeah, I mean, how many people do we know who are doing jobs that they don't like because their parents think that that's the job they should be doing. And I mean, we all have strengths and we all have weaknesses. And if we're in a job that suits us, we're constantly reminded about our strengths. And our weaknesses maybe don't matter as much. Whereas if we're in a job that doesn't suit us, we're only constantly getting negative feedback about our weaknesses and maybe not being reminded so much about our strengths. So, if we, and that's another thing about accepting who we are. We can't be good at everything, but having an awareness of what our relative strengths are compared to those around us, and being able to harness those strengths for ourselves and for the good of those around us is, it kind of validates ourselves and makes us feel good for what we are. And, I think that then complements the idea that we accept ourselves as we are. And that makes us kind of more grounded as people and happier people,
Yeah, like there's a bit of that self-satisfaction and purpose in life when you feel like, okay, let's say you work on something that will somehow help someone else, or, like someone who is developing software, for example, is helping, like for ease of use for thousands, if not millions of people to use certain apps with convenience, like, for example, now, what would we do without the GPS navigation or online booking systems? But there are people spending thousands of hours writing the code so that that app is not crashing and it's doing well. So, there's different people doing different jobs, and like I read a book, some spiritual book in the past, and they were talking about these yogis in India, and the guy's job was basically polishing these bollards at the train station, and all his job, possibly very low paid, was just to go with a piece of cloth and just like polish that top of the bollard, and that was all his job, and that was his kind of like a job, like a meditation, and he was obviously happy to do that. So sometimes even that step that we have, even though it's not exactly where you want to be, and perhaps you just accept the fact that that's where you are at the moment and pays your bills, and that's all you got at the moment, and just appreciate it. And I always say, if you cannot change the situation, change your attitude. So even if things are bad and that's not something you want to be in, the type of situation, you still have the kind of control about, I want to shift there, but doesn't mean I have to show everyone how much I hate this job, for example, or the situation.
Well, I tend to, if I'm under a lot of pressure, I say to myself, look, I'm just going to survive the next 5 minutes at a time, and if I survive the next 5 minutes, then I'll worry about the next 5 minutes. And I think that, one of the ways to stop being overwhelmed is to take your day, if it's a particularly stressful day, just 5 minutes at a time, and not be worried about, something that might happen this afternoon. Just really just focus on the next 5 minutes and doing what you need to do for your job just in those 5 minutes. And then you can incrementally get through the day, and, not trying to do too many things in your mind all at once then causes anxiety, and then your performance decreases. So allowing yourself these kind of coping skills where you just deal with 5 minutes at a time can actually really help us a lot in just getting through a difficult day, and that can help things.
Even when I was talking to Deirdre Hayes, and she was saying how in psychotherapy, in that sort of cognitive behavioral therapy, they talk about like I'm having a thought about cleaning the floor. Like if somebody's obsessive, for example, about something. Yeah, actually, since I talk to her and listen to it, sometimes when I find myself actually kind of delving into some kind of negative thought, I'm just reminding myself, I'm just having a thought about this. Doesn't mean that that's the whole world and reality is this. This is just me thinking about something, and I can just let it go and move on to something else to think about. And sometimes, having a routine where I'd say when you sleep well, you're going to actually feel much better. So having that sort of like healthy routine where you exercise, eat well, sleep well, and being around good people will make a whole difference in how you feel.
And reframing the perspective, like, for example, um, if I'm feeling bad because I'm lonely, that feeling of loneliness can be seen as a positive thing, because it's the driving force for you to go out and engage and meet new people. So actually feeling lonely it shows you that you've got energy to try and change that situation. You know what I mean? And similarly, like if we're in the gym and we're Otto can do more bench presses than me, you know, that you can see that emotion or that kind of mild jealousy, so to speak, as kind of, oh, this is motivation. I'm motivated to do better because I'm hanging around Otto, and I'm eager to improve myself. So that can be seen as a good thing rather than a bad thing per se. So Otto, I see you've invested in some new uh, podcasting equipment that's more mobile than some of your other stuff. I was just wondering whether, like how do you see your podcast evolving? What kind of content are you going to be subjecting your poor followers to over the next medium term?
Yeah, so I'd like to capture, knowledge of wise people who dedicated their years and years to acquire knowledge and practical experience, so they can explain very complex ideas in a simple terms. And eventually, like my style is motivation, inspiration, and encouragement.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I have on my website, and it kind of like wraps up the main idea that I want to bring anyone who can sort of encourage and motivate and inspire someone to do better.
Mm-hmm.
So anyone from, like you, for example, scientists in all sorts of different areas, but personal trainers, fitness instructors, nutritionists, psychotherapists, anyone who is interested, even having a guy, hopefully soon, about marketing and basically helping people to develop their own personal brand. Because once you can create your own personal brand, you can completely change your life, because suddenly you have like some sort of marketing idea that, okay, like I can shift to that direction. I need a plan, maybe I need a website, maybe I need some content. But in general, like podcasts, I don't force them to make a lot of content. I rather focus on quality, and also don't want to kind of overload everyone to have a podcast, let's say, every week. Like just to focus more on quality rather than quantity. But with sort of like a photo, video, audio equipment, I'm constantly expanding and sort of buying more high-end sort of professional pieces of equipment. And I want to be doing more videography, and like everything goes into it, like photography, videography, and high level of editing, to be able to offer it as a business and expand my abilities to make income as well. And the main thing is I'm really having fun with it. Like all this tech aspect of my job is that, like we have to master the technique, and I find it highly stimulating. I can sometimes spend 3-4 hours learning how to use, certain recording device with this type of microphone versus this type of microphone in all sorts of different conditions. So that's, for me, it's excitement. But then as I go through that sort of like a learning process, the ability to produce high quality content, that's really it. And like I want to add more video into the content as well, in sort of like a documentary style. So who knows, maybe in the future I'll be doing some documentaries, and make a like some more structured. But I'm still learning, I'm having fun with it, and I'm 100% sure the next 2 to 5 years it will be a different level to what it is now.
Interesting. And like, is there any one big topic that you felt is too complicated or too specialized to engage, that you hope that you may be able to engage with in the future? Or are you tackling everything that you wish to tackle?
I don't know really if I get your question, Stephen.
Oh, is there any area that you want your podcast to go in, that hasn't gone in that area yet, but that you may feel may you may go there in the future?
To be honest, I'm not sure because I'm picking those type of people that I know
Mm.
my listeners might want to hear.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, to be honest, like I follow a lot of podcasters. Many of them are really, really high quality, but they're guests on their schedule that I'm not interested into.
Yeah.
And I maybe listen to 5-10 minutes and it's like, oh, okay, that wasn't as interesting. That's not really the topic. Sometimes they only cut 10 minutes of something that was really cool and I like it. So same with my podcast. I don't expect everybody will like everything, but hopefully there's something for someone who will find it beneficial at some point.
So how do you take feedback from your audience? How do you assess how they react to particular things? Is it just kind of analytics? See, okay, this podcast was accessed, 20 times, and this one was accessed 100,000 times. Maybe I'll do more of that topic versus this topic. Or do you actually talk to people one-on-one and say, did you listen to my podcast? And if so, what was your feedback? How do you go about it?
Yeah, so one thing, actually, I get feedback from my clients because that's the main sort of like a circle of people I forward it to. And then I can see the analytics as well. But it's highly influenced by the people I have as guests because then they share it in their circles and some of them have much bigger circles than I have. So when I have someone and it's great and they share it, sometimes there's like maybe double the amount of people listening to it or watching it as if it wasn't promoted by external forces, for example.
And just something that popped into my head there was one thing that'd be an interesting construct in which to, go back and look at various aspects of healthy lifestyles are, different cultures and different countries and how they, engage with the pursuit of health. So, for example, in Ireland, I think we assign an awful lot of importance to social health, like people getting out and meeting people and, finding out about people and taking care of people. And, other cultures, they might be way more fixated with, exercise or eating particular types of foods, or like for example the French. I have a friend who married a French woman and moved to France, and is raising a family there. And in Ireland,
Derek,
yeah, exactly. I reached your friend Derek, and like one thing that he culturally, there's a huge difference between Ireland and France, in that there's very regimented parts of the day where you eat. That you get up and you have breakfast and at 8 o'clock, and then you have a snack, and then you have everything stops for lunch. And whereas in Ireland we've a far more kind of loose kind of attitude towards when we have meals and things of that nature. And it's some cultures that the structure is really important to the feeling of well-being, whereas in Irish culture we do things in a lot more kind of iterative, kind of
spontaneous.
Probably to do with the weather, maybe, I don't know. But it's just and then you got even just within Europe, you've got different cultures have very different attitudes towards, say, for example, sexual health, or other aspects of health, mental health, for example. So, some cultures would talk about mental health issues quite easily and without kind of like repression or negative kind of connotations, whereas maybe, other cultures don't. And, I just like kind of like, so I think what I was, my idea was that, you kind of look at the differences between countries in the way they deal with health-related issues.
You need to get someone who is expert on this type of, how we call it, sociological, psychological research in different societies. But I'd say a lot of cultural stuff that was sort of valid a couple of years ago might not be actually as accurate now, because the generations are kind of changing. We are so computerized at the moment, and so sort of like a life is presented on social media, that the real of happiness, for example, it's a competition as well. You can see the trends where a lot of ladies do some sort of cosmetic adjustments to their face, like lips, for example, and stuff like that. And it puts a lot of pressure on the other people. So our parents and our grandparents never had to deal with this type of stress. But now we have a whole new generation that worries about the lip filling and how they look on social media, for example, that image. And that could be very stressful for some people.
You know what? Well, I think there's one very contemporary stress at the moment now is how do I get to meet new people? So I was talking to a chap earlier on there today, and we're talking about Tinder and meeting people on Tinder and being tired of using Tinder, and but then he was asking, well, how do I meet people if I not through the apps? And I was advocating, just friends of friends, or like sports, or like some sort of like communal activity that just allows you to passively meet new people.
But it can be also very hard. I mean, like, you cannot force to make contact with someone. And even if you are in a job where you can talk to lots of people like that, lots of times, like, people put a huge wall of defense from anyone kind of entering their, vulnerabilities. So I'd say naturally a lot of people have like quite disconnect from people, especially of opposite sex, just to kind of protect themselves from a drama, for example, or people, people can be vulnerable and feeling weak in presence of some people. So I guess it's only natural that it's hard to meet or force to have someone to like you, for example. So then you have these apps where it makes it easier to kind of browse through people who are also maybe lonely, or maybe also looking for someone new, and then creating some sort of interest. So kind of that selective sort of process is kind of easier. So I must say for some people, especially who are introverts and shy, it makes it so much easier to find someone who has similar interest. So I wouldn't necessarily say that it's a bad thing, because if someone is really lonely and getting depressions and all that stuff because they're so lonely, maybe it will help them to find someone just to go for a coffee or for a chat, for a walk, and who knows, so maybe it will be into something more serious. But again, it's just the amount of people which you can browse through. It's kind of like, unheard of like a couple of decades ago.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I mean, to be honest, I think that you're coming into the context of you're deciding the destination as you start using the app. Like, I want to find a mate. Tinder is all focused on finding a mate, whereas sometimes things happen, like you're friends with someone first, and then, something happens and the relationship, becomes more romantic. And, I think that kind of, that gradual progression can evolve naturally. Like, I think one of the sad things is that there seems to be a lack of people wanting just friends of the opposite sex. It's either I just have, a lover, or I don't interact with the other opposites. And I think it's really important to have, friends who are of the opposite sex that you're not romantically involved in, just to be able to, to understand, the other side, so to speak. And, I think, like, you guys, friends of mine who kind of grew up in single sex schools, they've no, some of them have no female friends at all. And the only women they interact with are their sisters, their mothers, and, women they want to sleep with, for example. And I think that's very sad, because, like, there's the you can have a lot of really interesting conversations, and that, if you come at a situation from my perspective or a man's perspective, you can lose a lot of valuable things that a female perspective would bring into the situation, and vice versa, you know. Whereas, like, you know, I think we need to, I think, re-emphasize the importance of having friends from the opposite sex, especially in today's world where things are a little bit too defensive and a little bit untrusting, shall we say, because of all the media narrative that's out there, and kind of like, you know, some predatory people that are out there. You know, I mean, obviously most people are decent, trusting, caring people, like, you know. So, I mean, we shouldn't, you know, I think it's important that we don't see each other as kind of like
enemies,
a gender, we don't see each other as just a group threat. You know, there's a lot to learn from each other, you know.
Course, yeah. And don't you know why is it that in Irish schools there's that separation? Does it come from the times of Christian, sort of a Catholic Church kind of doctrine in Ireland?
I don't know. I mean, maybe it's simpler to teach all boys or all girls. Maybe teachers like doing it, dividing it up or something. But, you know, I went to, in my primary school, I was at an all boys school. Didn't really matter because you're pre-pubescent anyway. So, like, you know, whether there's girls in the class or boys, it's not too much of a difference at a very young age. But I did go to a mixed school when I went to secondary school. And a lot of my friends went to all male schools. And I think I evolved, you know, I had a lot of female friends and male friends. Whereas they didn't. They just had male friends. And then, you know, they had romantic kind of, you know, and I think it's good to have friends, you know, from, you know, it is very important for men to have female friends.
Well, in the same time, that could be also a bad influence, just being all around the guys who are all about, you know, certain type of behavior, let's say smoking cigarettes, drinking alcohol. So, you know, like you might skip.
Hyper competitive, or, you know, not seeing women as people, instead of seeing them as, you know, something that can, you know, is a source of gratification. Do you know what I mean? They're just not they don't see them as people, you know?
Yeah.
I think that can be a bit strange. In some kind of very male environments, they can be quite cynical and reductive and, you know, very uncomfortable, I think, yeah.
Yeah, well, everybody's different, I guess. Everybody is so special, and, you know, having a variety of people around it's really good.
To offset your own biases, because, like, if you're living in your own echo chamber, you can be really wrong about life.
Yeah.
And that can persist, and you can get into a big trouble. Whereas if you've got a lot of different types of people around you who have different biases, you know, their biases won't be the same as yours, and collectively you'll be able to get a deeper understanding of what the world is around you and how to make yourself happy and healthy and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, that's quite a variety of topics we covered today, from cancer, from sort of
mental health, hygiene, drive. You know, like your drivers in life. People around you, the importance of being social.
Also importance of having a routine, avoiding toxic news and toxic people, as always we remind this, and doing what you love, and be confident, and follow your passion and stuff like that. Work on your dreams, and, you know,
taking every 5 minutes at a time, not spending too much time in the past or the future. Generally, you know, be in the now, and not put yourself under unreasonable expectations, because life happens to a degree randomly. So, you know, you can't plan it all out and have it all go to plan.
Yeah. Take it easy sometimes. Don't need to control every aspect of life all the time. Just it's okay sometimes to to put it to the neutral a little bit and lay back and spend maybe 3 hours on a beach or for a long walk, and not to be always action, but also to be in a present moment and find, better situations maybe.
And, choose a job if you can that leverages your strengths, and, don't be in a job just because other people think you should take that job. It's good to be in a function where you're reminded of your strengths as a human being regularly, and maybe, not being reminded constantly about your weaknesses, as that'll make you more confident as a person. And also, we all have weaknesses, and there's no point in, over analyzing those weaknesses. We're human beings, not perfect. We're not perfect, but that's part of our charm.
Yeah, we're not robots. Anyway, thank you, Stephen, for sharing your knowledge again, your wisdom.
Sure. I don't know how much it is, but I hope we're entertaining anyway.
There we go. That's the Oto Winkler podcast. If you like the episode, you can check our older ones. Stephen was on at least 3 of them, talking science and, again, Stoic philosophy and stuff like that. So anyway, guys, talk to you later.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye-bye.